going on, everybody? Kim Becker and Aerith Dean here for your Colorado Avalanche AMA, brought to you by Mile High Sports. Aerith, the Colorado Avalanche and most NHL teams are on their all-star break already. There's still a couple games tonight happening before everyone really takes it off. Cale Makar will be representing the Colorado Avalanche in the all-star game this weekend in Sunrise, Florida, so that's exciting for him. Obviously, the Avs they were playing really well, had a tough loss to the Anaheim Ducks last week, not something that we expected to see, but where do you think that they stand right now heading into this break, and what do you hope to see when they return to the ice next week?
For starters, for the All-Star break, just want to throw it out there. Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen also are going to represent the Avalanche. They were just voted in afterwards. So once again, this team's got three representatives, and deservedly so. They're the Stanley Cup champions. They have three guys that are All-Stars, some of the best players in the NHL, and it just so happens to be the three guys that led the team in points for their Cup run. So three very deserving candidates that unfortunately won't get to have a little bit of a break, but it's a nice thing for them to do. The Avalanche look great. I mean, what a difference a couple of weeks makes. Going 7-1 in your last 8 games. Funny enough, the only loss coming to what was at that point the last place Anaheim Ducks, just like when they lost to Chicago, the last Chicago Blackhawks. But other than that, they look great. Their power play has been rocking. Their PK has been rocking. They finally, even though there's been some injuries here and there, and Nichushkin in and out and things like that, they seem to have some consistency, especially that top line with Rodriguez and Lehkonen playing on the wings of Nathan MacKinnon at center. They look well, even without Cale Makar. They won all 3 or 4 games without him. They're feeling a lot better than they were a couple of weeks ago, and now ultimately in their head, in their minds, it's about battling for the top spot in the Western Conference. It's still very much up for grabs, which is crazy to think after where they were a couple of weeks ago. But they're feeling pretty good about themselves. And the break comes at a much needed time as guys start to get healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll jump right into that. We'll also talk about a trade that happened with the Colorado Avalanche. So we'll get into all of that. But it's interesting. I just want to say you were talking about the Western Conference and, who would end up at the top there. The Avs are still favored to really make a run for the Stanley Cup. So it's interesting to see that in the sports books too. I mean, a lot of people still have a lot of faith in this Colorado Avalanche team. And so definitely something to keep an eye on there for sure. But like you said, this break comes at a great time. So we'll jump into this first question, kind of relating to that. Outside of the players who are injured, who benefits the most with some time off during the All-Star break for the Avalanche?
It's everybody. It's the players that are healthy too. It's for the ability, and I know I kind of made a little joke about Cale Makar, Mikko, and Nate there, but even those guys, they're not going into this All-Star game stressed out. They are not thinking game day practice. They're going there to have a little bit of fun, to do some public relations, take some photos, see some of their buddies around the league, probably go out the night before the game. It is ultimately a vacation for them as well. It is going to be not as much of a rest and relax as you would see for guys that are, healthy. Rodriguez, JT Compher, Andrew Cogliano, even Devon Taves, who's played a lot of minutes, the 2 goalies who have played a lot of games here recently. Those guys, Logan O'Connor, Eric Johnson, I think haven't missed a game yet this season. All of those guys are going to get a really good rest. And even Cale, Mikko, and Nate, even the guys that are not healthy, it's a chance for them to mentally unplug, physically unplug. Granted, Mikko, Nate, and Cale have to play a little bit of a gimmicky game that isn't going to involve much physicality, but it's a way to mentally, physically unplug and be refreshed and rejuvenated coming out of the break in more ways than just healing physically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fun. It really is going to be an exciting time for them. You always wonder and hope, that no one gets hurt, no one gets crazy, but definitely a week that they all kind of need, and hopefully those 3 can still have.
And I will add also the coaching staff. Jared Bednar's not going to the All-Star game this year. Coaching in the NHL, as it is in most sports, is most days a 6 a.m. to midnight job. It is long hours. It is stressful. I know Jared said he was going to spend some time with his family up in the mountains. They were going to kind of unplug. It is going to be really big for those guys as well, because those are the guys steering the ship, and they're going to get a little break here as well.
Sweet. All right. What area of their game do the Avs need to improve upon the most after this break, do you think?
If this was 2 weeks ago, I would have said consistency. Now I would just say it's defensive. It's their defensive ability in a full 60-minute effort is probably the biggest thing right now. We've seen them play some really great games here recently. We've seen them take early leads and hold on to those leads, but we've also seen them kind of take their foot off the pedal at the end of games or at the beginning, sometimes in the middle of games. There's different stretches of the game where they're not playing that full 60-minute effort, and Jared has kind of fixated on that a little bit. I would say that's the biggest thing right now. It's not a matter of, if you score 3 goals in the first period where you better do it again in the second and third and score 9 goals. It doesn't necessarily need to be that. But, think back to the Stanley Cup final, Game 6 against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They trailed 1-0 after the first. They got 2 goals in the second period after the second. They took a 1-goal lead into the third. And think of how many multi-goal leads they've blown this year. They took a 1-goal lead into the third period in Tampa Bay against the 2-time defending champs for a chance to win the cup, and they shut them down defensively like I've never seen before. So you don't necessarily have to keep your foot on the pedal offensively the entire time, but you got to have that full 60-minute effort. And I know it's the middle of January, February right now. The games don't matter as much as obviously the game where you can win it all, but that's just an example of what they can do and are capable of.
Well, and we know that all of these tend to add up and they all matter, and we can't have them go back to, that negative streak they were going. So, yeah, absolutely. Makes total sense here. Okay, I mentioned a little bit that the Avs did make a trade this last week, so we do have a question here. I'll have you kind of elaborate on how that all went down and what you think of it, Eric. So if you want to just kind of explain what happened with this trade and where the Avs stand, then I'll roll into our next couple questions.
Yeah, the Avalanche traded a couple players. They traded a depth defenseman who had played a little bit of forward at times, and Jacob McDonald, as well as a prospect who they kind of left a little bit more to be desired, and Martin Kaut, to the San Jose Sharks for a depth forward and a familiar face in Matt Nieto, and San Jose's own version of their prospect who had left more to be desired in Ryan Merkley. So ultimately, it's split up into 2 sections. Jacob McDonald for Matt Nieto, Martin Kaut for Ryan Merkley. Ryan Merkley's playing with the Colorado Eagles. Matt Nieto plugged right back into the lineup. He's been playing top 6 because he's been replacing Val Nichushkin in the 2 games he's been injured. Okay. But ultimately, Nieto will be a bottom 6 forward on this team. He's a familiar face. They love him in the locker room. He is one of their favorite characters that's come through this team for over the last 5 or 6 years. Obviously, he had that first stint with the Avalanche. He joined them in January of 2017 during that horrible season and was there in 18, 19, and 20 for 3 straight playoff runs. Then he signed with San Jose for 2 years, which is the team they initially got him for. And now he's back January of 2023, 6 years later, 30 years old, and he's still riding high and playing well.
All right. In honor of Nieto being back in the lineup, do you have a fun memory from his first go around with the Avalanche?
Yes. So there's 2. There's an on ice and off ice. Off the ice, I'm going to refer back to, and I don't like to have a lot of memories from this time, but back in the days of Zoom, back in the days of the playoff bubble of 2020, Whoa. When the entire NHL was in Edmonton, I think the NBA was in Disney or something. During that time, there was a media availability with Matt Nieto, I want to say Matt Calvert, and maybe Nathan McKinnon. There was a couple guys there, and we were going through the questions. And you can actually Google this, and I'm not going to try to imitate it, but you can Google it. You can YouTube it. There is video out there of it where somebody was asking a question, and then the next person was told, so-and-so, it's your turn to ask a question. And for whatever reason, it just sounded like, I don't know what was going on with their mic, but it sounded like a hamster asking a question. It was just me, and then it stopped. The players died laughing, and then the press conference ended. It is one of the funniest things. I did a terrible job of explaining it. It's one of the funniest things you can look up on YouTube. I don't know why it happened like that, but maybe we were getting, the Zoom call for the Avalanche media availability after one of their games against Arizona was getting hijacked by someone. I don't know, but it was great. On the ice, Matt Nieto, who is a player that is in that 10 to 15 goal range, usually in a good season, scored his first career hat trick for the Avalanche in October of 2017. And the reason why that game matters so well, the Avalanche had just lost 3 straight games. Remember, this is the season coming out of the 2017 season that just was terrible, where they had 48 points.
Right.
This was still in October. Matt Duchene was still on the Avalanche, with everybody the entire NHL and hockey world kind of hampering Joe Sakic, like, why haven't you traded this guy yet? You've dropped the ball. You got to trade him. The Avalanche had just lost 3 straight games. They are at home against the Dallas Stars in front of 12,800 fans in a building that holds 18,000 plus. That's a sellout every night now. They only had 12,000 fans there. They beat the Stars 5-3. Matt Nieto scored his first and only hat trick in the NHL that night. And since then, after that, the Avalanche won 4 of 5 games. going right into the night where they traded Matt Duchene, which then they went to Sweden and played those 2 games against Matt Duchene and the Senators, and then they came back and they took off. Nathan MacKinnon became a whole new person. Mikko Rantanen became a whole new person. The Avalanche took off. They made the playoffs in game 82 against the St. Louis Blues. To me, it all started with that night. Matt Nieto scored the hat trick. The Avalanche won 4 of 5 games. They traded Duchene, and it was all on the up from there. So it's been a long time since then. It was a 25-year-old Nieto at that time.
Yeah, but hey, that's a great memory.
Yeah, he's back with the Avalanche. He's back in the locker room right next to Nathan MacKinnon, who, for people, not me personally, but for people that were big into the streaming, Matt Nieto and Nathan MacKinnon are massive Fortnite guys that just spent a lot of nights of Fortnite together. When I walked into the locker room the other day, because you got to remember, the locker room looks a little different than it did when Nieto was here. They got that upgrade this summer. When I walked in and saw Nieto's stall right next to Nathan MacKinnon's, it all made sense.
Memories. There you go. Nostalgia. You love it. That is so fun. Well, good. We love that. We love to hear stuff, especially about these guys that we all don't get to see all the time. So we love hearing all of that, Arif. We've got a couple more questions here before we wrap this one up. The next one is, do the Avs have what it takes to win the Stanley Cup right now, or do you think they need to move big at the trade deadline?
Fully healthy, they have what it takes, but that's the problem. It's fully healthy. It's 12 forwards, 6 defensemen, and 2 goalies, which it's not going to be the case.
No.
Even last year when they were, relatively healthy-ish, Nazem Kadri missed a few games with the broken thumb. Andrew Cogliano had a broken finger. Burakovsky ended up missing the last, I think, 3 games of the Stanley Cup final after scoring the game winner in game 1. Abe Kubel was in and out of the lineup, healthy scratch playing. You need depth. Yeah. The Avalanche right now, they don't have the best second line. If they were fully healthy, it would probably be Rodriguez with Landeskog and Nichushkin. Yeah. The third line would probably be Comfer, Newhook, and Nieto. And the fourth line, O'Connor, if Helm is healthy, him as well. And on the right wing, and on the left wing is obviously Cogliano. So that's a pretty good lineup, and that's a lineup that can win you a cup. The problem is they are 1 forward injury away from Dennis Malgin or Curtis McDermott, or players that should be lower on your depth chart. Ben Myers, people that haven't really stepped up in their roles yet this season. So if you trade for a second-line center, for example, which obviously is the big word now, if you trade for a second-line center, Rodriguez is now a third-line depth forward. Matt Nieto is now a third-line winger, but you have Matt Nieto is now a fourth-line winger because you have Alex Newhook and JT Compher playing with Rodriguez. Now you have, if Helm is healthy, Helm, Cogliano, O'Connor, and Nieto, 4 very capable forwards that should all be playing, but one of them won't be playing if they're fully healthy. That's how much depth you need to win the Stanley Cup. Yeah. So do they have what it takes to win the cup right now? Yes. If this was EA Sports and you turn injuries off on the game, and you play the 12 healthy forwards you have, the 6 best defensemen you have, the 2 best goalies you have, they absolutely do. But it's that depth that they need, that they had last year, that they have not replaced yet, which obviously they can do here in the next month.
Okay, do you think that the Avs will add a 7th defenseman then?
That's a good question. I like this one, and I purposely wanted to answer this one because I haven't thought much about that recently because of Brad Hunt and the way he's been playing. And also Andreas Englund. Like, I know those are not the biggest names, but they are ultimately similar to what the Avalanche had last year in Jack Johnson and Ryan Murray. So we know who the top 6 are. It's Taves and Makar. It's Byram and Manson. It's Eric Johnson and Sam Girard. Those are your top 6. Last year they had Ryan Murray and Jack Johnson. This year they have Brad Hunt and Andreas Englund. Is it a step down? Maybe a little bit, but not by much.
Okay.
So they still have 8 capable defensemen like they did a year ago. Granted, they traded their number 9 defenseman in Jacob McDonald, and I don't know how much Curtis McDermott you want playing defense in the playoffs. So it is a good question. I think if they do bring in another depth defenseman, it'll be a very under-the-radar move for like a low-level draft pick or prospect, just of a team unloading a player, similar to what San Jose did last year with Andrew Cogliano in that trade. So that is a good question. It hasn't been top of mind for me because of the depth they need at forward. But I mean, last year's Sakic and McFarland made 4 moves. They brought in defenseman in Manson, and they brought in 3 forwards in Nico Sturm, Arturi Lehkonen, and Andrew Cogliano. So 3 or 4 moves this year will probably include a defenseman as well.
Okay. All right. Okay, Arif, well, thank you so much. Like we said, the Avs are on break this week, so you and I will reconvene after the All-Star break, and we'll talk about what's going down with this team, what we can look forward to. But appreciate your time. Appreciate everybody tuning in here to the Colorado Avalanche AMA, brought to you by Mile High Sports. I'm Kim Becker. He is Arif Dean, and we'll see you next week.